Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the public board meeting of March 21st, 2023. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that the Campbell River Board of Education is situated on the traditional territories of the Lakota people. Please note that there is a short production delay between the live event that you are viewing and meeting participants. And the question and answer function is open for questions on agenda items throughout the virtual meeting. A final call for questions will be made after the last agenda item, and questions will be addressed before the end of the session. So I'd like to call the meeting to order this evening at 7:32. And as my chairperson's remarks, I want to share a great story that I had an opportunity to participate in an event today at Robron. It was the Indigenous Achievement Celebration, where students are recognized by their educators for the great work and commitment that they themselves have personally put into their education. Parents are invited, we had cultural leaders there, and it was a really beautiful small group of kids that found connection to education through some of our alternative pathways. And in turn, they had an opportunity to find achievement and their own dreams through Robron Center and the teaching staff there. So I would like to thank the teaching staff of Robron Center for the extraordinary work that they do, and for those kids for just believing in themselves enough to keep going. That's it for me, and I'll move it on to Jeremy Morrow and superintendent's remarks.
Well, thank you very much, Charity. I have a couple of really positive pieces to share tonight. I would like to start by congratulating the students of Timberline Secondary School who just recently completed their successful musical Chicago, the Teen Edition. And it also provides a great opportunity to recognize Selene Olette, an outstanding music director and teacher in our district for a significant number of years, who I understand was her last musical production prior to retiring. And so an opportunity to congratulate her for that. And you know, actually I was thinking about both the musicals at Timberline and at Carey High, and really just to acknowledge the countless hours and dedication that both our students and our staff put to make those happen. And I would put in a plug that Carey High's Newbies production is coming up in April, and as is often the case, these productions sell out. So I am putting a plug in to get your ticket. But it was also an opportunity to reflect how outstanding the work is on behalf of students and staff that made sure that even in the disruption of not being able to produce live musicals, in previous years, they've recorded, they've done live productions through the internet and so on. So just really wanting to express my gratitude of the deep commitment that our educators have to ensuring that our students have access to fine arts in our schools. So grateful for that. I do see President of QP 723, Andrew Craddock, in the crowd, and it's perfect because the next thing on my comments are just to advertise and celebrate QP 723 for sponsoring a family swim that's available for all families in our community, that's taking place at Strathcona Gardens this Saturday, March 25th. Taking off a little bit from Chair Eddie, I do want to acknowledge that over the past several weeks, most schools have celebrated the achievements of several of their outstanding Indigenous students, and schools have recognized these achievements, with many of the students' families able to attend to support various celebrations of student learning. I also want to take an opportunity tonight to express or to celebrate the extraordinary achievements of 3 gold medal winners at the recent Regional Skills Canada competition. So I want to acknowledge the following students who have qualified for the provincial competition in Abbotsford in April. That's Elliot Sidlick and Logan Jones, who got gold in 3D animation, Andrew Haribko, who got gold in cabinet making, and Marcus Johnson, who received gold in welding. So those are Carey High and Timberline students. I'm also pleased to acknowledge tonight that we're partnering with the Campbell River Family Network, City of Campbell River, and Pacific Care to once again offer the Ready, Set, Go Children's Health Fair in April, on April 14th from 10 to 1 p.m. It's an opportunity for child development screening, hearing and speech screenings, family resources, snacks, more, and free transit is being provided by BC Transit to that event. And I think it's important too to acknowledge that last week was our middle and secondary student-led conference day, and it's an important feedback loop, and we're grateful for the participations of our parents in that feedback process. And then lastly, while we have 4 lovely educators from Phoenix here tonight, what a welcome. First of all, we really appreciate you coming in the final week prior to a well-earned spring break, and just acknowledging and thanking our staff and students for their efforts and wishing on them a wonderful, much-deserved break. I am excited that when we return, well, first it's going to be feel like a very short window till summer, but I know it's going to be an awesome finish to the year. So I'm excited about that, and we appreciate our Phoenix staff who's here to present, and I know Trustee Eddie will introduce them. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Morrow. Moving on to item number 3, approval of the minutes of the meeting of February 28th, 2023. So moved by Trustee Harper, seconded by Trustee Gillis. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? So moved. Is there any business arising from the minute? Seeing none, moving on to additions or alterations to the agenda. Seeing none, the approval of the agenda is that the board declares that, no, that's the wrong one, excuse me, that the agenda is hereby approved as circulated. May I have a mover? Trustee Brake, seconder. Trustee McMahon, any discussion? All those in favor? Excellent. And Vice Chair Gillis, for the report of board decisions from the March 21st, 23.
Well, we are in the midst of a robust meeting that has discussed land, legal, and labor, and we will be returning to complete the meeting following the public meeting.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair Gillis. Seeing no correspondence and no public submissions and no additional agenda submissions, we'd like to move on to item 11, which are educational submissions. The Thrive program from Phoenix Middle School. I would like to introduce Rachel Nelson, Ryan Schnard, Tammy Dodge, and Mike Muncie to come forward and present. No?
Yes.
You don't want to join up? Come
Maybe Miss Tammy Johnson, maybe the last name got confused.
Tammy.
Another educator.
Oh, Tammy,
No, it's
I'm
okay.
sorry.
Thank you.
Tammy,
Tammy.
Tammy.
That's right. We got the important part. Yeah. Thank you. I just want to thank the Board of Trustees, and I want to thank senior management for inviting us to this conversation. Mike and I is the admin team, and we're a new team together at École Phoenix. And we've been having some conversations with I'm so sorry about that. Let's get that. We've been having some conversations with our staff this year as a new admin team, just around what is this narrative of our school? So it sort of started with sort of coming together. What's our story? What do we want our story to be? What is the story that students and parents talk about when they talk about their neighborhood school and where their children attend? And then we sort of evolved into a deeper conversation around what do our really vulnerable students say about our school and their school. And we wondered about how to better surface their voice and the parent voice. Students that are already thriving in our building, we have a pretty good indication of how they're doing. So we sort of led through some conversations through the fall with our staff, sort of exploring that idea and wanting to look at this idea of belonging and hope and efficacy, and how do we foster that? That's what we identified as the narrative of the school from educators. And we had a hunch that maybe the pandemic had provided us with an opportunity to reflect on how we could help students return to their school routines, those that hadn't successfully done that, and how we might shift their narrative about their school identity and how they feel about school. So we sort of started with wanting to anchor to, so we did some work around coming up with an acronym that would actually be responsive to a student learning environment. That it will be a little bit focused more on being responsive to student needs for students who have not re-engaged fully with school, right, post-pandemic. And so we thought about being together, honoring Indigenous ways of knowing and doing, reflecting students' needs, goals, and passions, innovation, and it's inclusive, the voice of students and engagement. And what we wanted to do was have those be the anchoring conversation for a group of educators that would run a grade 6, 7, and 8 class next year at Phoenix, where students would focus, teachers would focus on that re-entry point for students who have, for various reasons, not attended school regularly, right, over the last 2.5 years. Unfortunately, it's a daunting number when we look at our attendance statistics, so we needed to be responsive to that. And we have the right team in place. We have an innovative, powerful group of educators who are ready to do that work. I need to be really transparent with you. I was the vice principal several years ago, but I'm back as the principal this year. And Ryan Schnard, who I'll pass this over to next, has been championing this conversation for probably 6 or 7 years, in the midst of a lot of change in terms of leadership, and has been the steadfast voice for needing a program that responds to our most vulnerable students in terms of how they access learning, how they find success, and how they are ready to navigate secondary school. So I want to make sure that, so Ryan did a bit of a student voice survey and a bit of, Tammy did some work around the parent voice. So Ryan will lead you through that. So essentially next year, we are going to run 3 classes, right, with 3 teachers who internally applied. And they had to apply with the letter of intent that they were willing to lean into a responsive environment to students who maybe weren't identifying as students for whatever reason, right? A variety of reasons that would keep them from attending school regularly. So we have a great team together. They've started to collaborate and build this program. And I think Ryan can sort of set the stage now just around the underpinning of why there's a need and how that need has progressed and what we hope to do next year. And then I think Mike will take it from there. So I'll hand that over to you, Ryan.
Yeah, so I think when Rachel was first there and Laird was principal, we'd have our caddy meetings, and we, at the end of it, we'd go through who's not attending, who's gonna make the phone call, and between the 4 of us, it was an easy list to handle. I'll take these 5, you take those 5, we make the phone calls, we do the home visits, and we'll get them back on track. As years went and the pandemic came, when we started pushing on parents, they go to homeschooling, and we stopped pushing, they pop in and out. And just a revolving door of conversations I was having in the counseling office of like getting kids into the building. How can we get you in? Is it driving by? Is it home visits? Is it, I mean, we've done everything with these kids to get them in, and then they kept on disappearing. And the number of the kids that we were meeting in the parking lot are having those daily phone calls. And then when Caddy came out, that list was too big to acknowledge. So I thought it was bad, and then so just doing some deep diving, what I did was I went in and then this year and just said, okay, who's missed 30 days of attendance last year? And that list was too big to handle. So then who missed 40 days last year? And that list was too big to handle. So I settled on who had missed 50 days last year, and it was about between the 3 grades was 100 to 50, 160 kids in that range. And then we split them up by grades and started working backwards. So I went, if you hit the next slide, Mike. So this would be the group of kids we're looking at for next year's grade 8 class. So what I did was I started in this column in middle for 2021. So that is everybody where they started, went 1 year back, and this is where they've currently missed already this year. So like this student here has already missed 60 days this year. So trying to see if there's a pattern, what the pattern is. Then we started to look if they're designated, found them reading, writing, math, and behavior. And so like you can see there, the top student they've missed in the last, you can't even see 3 years because this year's not done. They're already at 257 days of school missed. And so what we're finding with this pattern is the way that we are doing this now, our non-enrolling teachers are doing the work to get them in, but then we're expecting our teachers that are teaching 24 kids to be able to invite this kid in, settle this kid, get them caught up while keeping pace with the other kids. So what we're finding, the feedback from these kids is we can get them in the building. We can get past the anxieties. We can get them in the building. But then once they're in the class and they are calm and their mind is settled and they look at the teacher, it's game over. They don't know what the teacher's saying. The project that's presenting is in the middle of it. Our teachers are doing the best they can. They're being so welcoming. And some of the feedback from the kids is pretty not what I expected. So when I come in and there's a list of 20 assignments there and my teacher is being so nice and like, hey, let's wipe that off. Let's start fresh. The kids are, it's actually deflating for the kids. I know I need to learn that. I know I can learn that. And it's just gone. So how am I going to move forward? So then once they get the anxiety settled and they're sitting in the classroom, then we really lose them because they give up. They're too far behind. What am I supposed to do? I missed all of grade 6. Now it's grade 7. How do I catch up in this? So the basis of the program would be not project based, not group based. If I'm gone for a week and I come back, I need to be able to start where I left. I need to be able to join the classroom and feel like I'm part of the classroom, not have everybody talking about this major project that they're finished, that the teacher's gonna just let me sit and be so kind and let me wait the next couple days till that finishes so that I can join the next unit of math unit or next reading project or next group project, because by that time they're getting them in, they're getting overwhelmed and they're leaving. And what we're finding too is we can get through this cycle with kids a couple times. We can get you in, we can get you in class, freak out, they're overwhelmed, they disappear. We might have to do it again, but eventually then it's hard to have those conversations with kids when they just flat out say, what's the point? Right? I've tried. I'm too far behind. I can't keep up. Everybody's moving at this fast pace. I can't go at that pace. So we really want to focus on numeracy and literacy. Lots of these kids that is happening are super capable. If you go back, like you can see that there's not as many designated kids as I thought would be in there. So most of these kids are capable kids that just have huge amount of gaps. How do we expect a kid that's missed 270 or 57 days to be able to function in a normal classroom at a normal pace and not expect them to have gaps? So how do we create an environment for them where they can fill those gaps in, get ready, so when they get to high school, they've been back in the habit of attending school, and that we filled in some of these gaps so that they can actually do work at their potential. So I think that's where we came up. And I think this list, there's missing some too. There's roughly 60 candidates per class, which is a little bit crazy of a number too. We've already sat with Kerry High and gave them what this year's list, and we are unfortunately sending Kerry High some kids that have missed. I mean, we met with Kerry High in January and they're already at like 260 something days. So they're going to go into Kerry High missing all of middle school pretty much. And so how are we going to get them and give them any chance to be successful? So that's sort of where it came from. And we've been, over the years, we've been bouncing lots of different ideas around how to get these kids, but I think it is the point now that the numbers are big enough and that we need a more, not welcoming because our teachers are really welcoming, but a different environment. What we're doing right now isn't working and we're not catching them. And we can't expect our teachers in our school to grab these kids, catch them up, and keep up with the curriculum pace of a normal 6, 7, grade 8 class curriculum.
So I think just an additional part before, I know Mike has some things to share, is the classroom setting, you know, in terms of parent voice, and the classroom setting will be responsive. So students will be involved in that, but the 3 teachers are already collaborating around the pacing, what that looks like when a student walks in, if they walk in at 9 versus 10 a.m. And how we create a welcoming and responsive environment. So some of the parents this year, Tammy was able to source some sort of street data from our parents around kids in our building right now who are struggling and how their parents would feel when we describe the program like this. And some of the ones that stick out for me is that flexibility. So these classes will run their own PE classes and will be with the same teachers all day, but there'll be fluidity between the 3 teachers, grades 6, 7, and 8, to do collaborative things and move within those 3 classrooms and have learning opportunities spread between those 3 educators. So it'll create the ability for them to be flexible in a lot of ways, to be connected to their own learning pathways within their middle school experience. And a child feeling heard and a parent feeling like they have a contribution Part of what that will be building relationships and bringing family into the conversation around their child's gifts. And our primary goals at middle school, we see a 3-year opportunity with our students. And that 3-year opportunity is literacy and numeracy, meet them where they're at and move them forward so they feel confident and they identify as a student and they're ready, you know, for their next steps, for their next goals. And so there's clarity, right, within those goals and anchoring to that work. So pretty powerful incentive from parent voice too when we surface that.
And when we talk to teachers lots, it's about if one of the teachers, the grade 8 teachers is teaching a math concept to a small group, it doesn't mean if there's a grade 6 kid that is at that level, they can't join that and get that math concept. But the teaching in small group environments instead of the large group where the kids are still sitting there listening to a teacher talk about something that they are not there yet. And getting that feeling of being deflated.
Thanks, Brian. I just went back to the slide because I want to keep these numbers up because I will talk about it a little bit. I've been at Phoenix for 6 years, 4 years as a teacher, now 2 years as an administrator. So I remember what Ryan was talking about 5, 6 years ago, and just that this isn't necessarily a new problem for Phoenix. Having students that struggle to attend regularly isn't a new problem, and Phoenix is definitely not the only school that has students that struggle to attend regularly. It could be for any number of reasons. It can be transportation issues, anxiety, illness or injury, a history of negative experiences with the school district, and that's for the school in general, I should say, for that student or for their family, any number of personal reasons. But there's a reality that Ryan talked about where when it was manageable number of students, it was a handful of students that were really struggling, just the effect that the disruptions to education that we had with COVID is really, it's a really pronounced effect. And then Ryan spoke to it where it was a handful of students. Now we're talking about being able to fill 3 full classes. And we've seen that the impact that the disruptions from COVID had on students, it's impacted all our students, but it has impacted our vulnerable students the most, these students. These are in some cases students who have had barriers to accessing education, and COVID was just another barrier. Unfortunately, it became a barrier for some students that didn't previously have a barrier, whether it was their health of the family member. Families had all kinds of reasons for alternative arrangements for students. But we found that a lot of these students and their families have struggled to re-engage since we've come back. And not just into the daily routines of education and the system. The analogy that I have is that we're asking them to jump on a treadmill that's going 10 miles an hour when they haven't run in 2.5 or 3 years, because it's been 3 years for some of these students. We see some of these students where there is no data because they were homeschooled potentially, and we just don't have that data there. But I don't think it's all doom and gloom, right? COVID was a big disruption, but it's also, it was a great challenge, but it was also a great opportunity. We let a lot of things that we did, we kind of put them down for a few years, and we've had the opportunity to bring back the ones that were good for students. And we've had the chance to leave some of them where we put down, right? Where we found really what was this doing for students? Was this a good thing? We haven't gone back to all those things. So it's an opportunity to leave those things behind. And it's also an opportunity to build something different, to reframe how we engage with students and families who have and continue to be disconnected with the school and with their learning. We see these students struggling now. If we look at our grad rates since COVID as a district have not been what we would want them to be. We've seen that effect. We don't want to wait until we're talking about graduation. We see some of these students struggling in grade 6, 7, and grade 8. And for us, and we've spoken about it in our groups, it's a really uncomfortable spot to be as an educator, as an educational leader, to look at a 10-year-old and to look, because he's like every line up there is a name attached to it, right? And to look at those students and say, I'm concerned about what the future looks like for that kid. And to, you know, what are we gonna do about it? We have to do something different. We have to change. And I think this is a great opportunity to reframe how we're doing that and to affect a positive change in the system. So we're excited about this program. We think that we have the right people in place to make some big improvements for these students whose numbers are up on the board there. We're grateful that we're able to come and speak to you guys today. And what we really hope is to come back to you guys next year at this time and celebrate the successes that we've had in providing these students with an educational opportunity that meets their needs.
And do you want to hit the last slide there? Oh, perfect, thank you. I think, and it won't be, we'll be in the background and we'll be listening to the 3 teachers share with you next year. And sharing the success stories and some of their deep learning and innovation that they've been doing. We have the right team there. I know all of our schools have absolutely stellar educational staff, and Phoenix is right in keeping with that. We have the right people in the room who are digging deep for kids every day, but 3 real innovators who are taking us on. We also have some of our district staff supporting and bringing their wisdom to share in the context. So we're creating a sustainable model for this to continue. And the idea is to reintegrate students into that regular routines to support their sense of identity as learners and to spark a love for learning and excitement and hope. So it really is a positive message around hope. There's a day of collaboration today with teachers and district staff, and it was absolutely a powerful way for us to lead into this presentation. So we're thankful for the opportunity to share. The work is messy and it's innovative, and it's going to be something that is amazing for some young people. So,
Thank you.
yeah, thanks.
Questions, trustee McManus, followed by trustee Hudson.
It's unclear to me when this will start, or has it started? Are the teachers working on their, you know, pedagogy right now, or what? Where are you?
Great question. Today was the first day of planning. There's 3 more intensive days of planning, and they are planning on the edges of their current teaching practice. Those classes will start in September. And we will continue with this as long as there's a need. They're doing some innovative things that are responsive to the students who are identifying in that program through your attendance needs. However, it's innovative in the sense that it's not about a learning profile. It's not about catching up, and it's not about students that are behind. It's about an access point. So some students who are quite strong learners but have missed time will be in there and will be able to jet ahead, and others will be on pace and get their needs met. So it's a class that doesn't fit only a certain learning profile. So it's an environment that will be responsive to how that student presents. But September is our exciting start date.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the clarification.
Trustee Harper.
Could you put up the first slide again? I was trying to capture what RIVE stood for.
Oh, sure.
Because it was good to have it.
This is, what was the words you used earlier, Ms. Nelson, with this document? It's,
Oh, it's iterative.
yes.
Yeah,
Iterative.
we had to come up with something to aim for our learning, but it is iterative in the sense that we're talking with teachers, and some of them are like, well, so reflecting student needs too close to student voice. And so we're still playing with it, but we also needed to anchor to, that's how they're doing some planning.
And my other question was, so is this going to be a blended like 7, 8, 9 rooms? Or is there going to be
No.
a room of 7, a room of 8, and a room of 9?
6, 7, all.
Or sorry, 6, 7, 8.
Yeah. They will be set with their grade, teacher by grade.
Okay.
And then our hope is that at the end of the year, our 6s that are on track and are feeling comfortable and are continuing attendance, we will move back into a regular 6-7 classroom, and our 6s that we're still struggling to get hold of, or they're not feeling a comfortable spot, will continue. And as you saw that list, that would be our grade list. There's 56 kids on there. There's only 28 spots. So then it would be, are some of those kids still struggling? Can those kids join that program for grade 7 to try to get them back on track if they get extra? So
The other thing I noticed, you pointed out that there were dramatically few designations on that list. So does that mean that the students who had supports through having lots of educational assistance, however, they tend to reintegrate better after COVID, or no connection with that?
I don't know. This list is the fewest. Our grade 7 list is probably double that for IEPs. So it's sort of, I think it's just sort of by age.
Okay.
Who happens to be there. And I was talking to teachers today, and it's like I have full faith that some of these kids will be designated once we get them sitting in a seat and get, because right now the question is it a learning thing or is it a absent learning? So once we
tend to not to get it.
yes, so when they do the testing and they're low, what's the reason for that low? Is it because they just haven't been here? So hopefully we can find that out. And if they're eating that IEP, then we can get that in place for them to get that full.
I think this is exciting and I'm certain that there's going to be dramatic results that you can't even anticipate. Yeah, it's just doing things differently is going to make things happen.
I had that conversation with teachers today. They were feeling a lot of pressure and I said, there's really no pressure with this program. If it works, it will be great. And if it doesn't work, the kids, they are not attending or anyways. So anything that we can get, if they attend 10 more days than they did this year, then it's worth a shot. Yeah.
Terrific.
Trustee Gills.
Well, yeah, I think this is up there. I don't know if you know this, but the Rotary International incoming president's theme is bring hope to the world. And I think we're going to bring hope to a group of students and certainly their families. And I have two questions that I was trying to choose between and I can't, so I'm going to ask them both. And the first one is you've just been so thoughtful in your process of putting the right people on the bus to be with. Are you able to do the same thing with your support people that will work within that classroom? Do you have them kind of self-elect and
Yeah, great question. Yes, absolutely. And we're being quite thoughtful and targeted around our youth care workers and educational assistant support and our school-based team and our living support team and how we can be creative. They're part of the conversations for our school-based team agendas around how we can be creative in supporting a model that is just a slight shift. And you know, we're doing some learning as we go. Mike's analogy, because he's good with analogies, is we're building the plane as we learn to fly it. So that is sort of the feeling that we have. And so there's a discomfort in that learning, but the team, the support team is there and wants to be a part of. There's a momentum and an energy in the building around this, really positive. People are excited to be a part of it.
The other thought was just, have you, I'm sure you have, so I'm setting you up to answer the questions. I guess it's really around the connection with families. It's how do you build them as partners and expressing that voice that's important and access. Have you thought of how you will kind of win them over?
So I think part of it too is like, there's lots of ideas based on what type of support we have from the program. There's talk about like all our non-enrolling people will be attached to those for the first period of every day. So whether it's the teacher making phone calls or us making phone calls, or whoever has connection with that phone calls will be made in real time about hope to see you today. Whether it's 9:30 or even if it's 2:30, come by and say hi. We're monthly, whether it's a family lunch or family dinner or family breakfast. I think it's going to be an alternative all three, so we can hit everybody. Maybe starting with lunch, so it's like, hey, got up at 10, perfect, come have lunch, look at the room, look at the space, so those type of things. And then we do have a few other ideas that I'll be calling the Foundry tomorrow to see how we can bring them in to help us parents, because now there's a learning piece that we're gonna try to pull the parents in. How do we bring them for dinner, but like have them stay and listen to like how to deal with your kids' anxiety or sleep routines or whatever it might be. So there's lots going on about how to get those families involved and how to get them in the building. It is a curious list when you go through. Lots of those parents are pushing, they just can't get their kids out. And there's some of the kids that want to come, but the parents can't help them get out. And some that will just be stop calling the house and go to school.
I've talked to those people.
Trustee Gladish.
Thank you.
Okay. I love your acronym. It's just wonderful. And I love the thought you have about being welcoming and responsive to student needs, because I think that's going to make all the difference in the world. I also know how important it is for peers to connect with each other, because peers are powerful. They are more powerful than any one of us can be with them. So I wondered if you had thought maybe a about bringing them outside and doing some things to help sort of build that sort of sense of connection with who they are and, you know, how to build fire or to, you know, just be outside and, you know, Dave Suzuki has a lot to say about the power of being out in nature. So
Drew Williams was with us today and talked about the program that he ran way back when, and they're collecting resources of anybody and anybody in town that might be involved, and all the people that can bring in and out and day trips, and it's, yeah.
Even just, yeah, dreaming, job shadowing, what is it that you are curious about, learning more about, and weaving that into literacy. Yeah, you invite to come and sit in one of the planning meetings, it's pretty exciting.
I also really like the honoring indigenous ways of knowing and doing, and, you know, I wonder, you know, how do people know what that is? And I'm curious about what that would look like in your program, because they are so central to connecting people and understanding who we are as human beings and how we connect with each other and to the world around us and all that. So I'm really very, very pleased to see that that's part of the program. Thank you. Way to go.
Dr. Morrow?
Thank you, Mike. I just want to share, you know, we've received 892 responses to the board survey, asking for community, parents, and students to respond to some of the revisioning for the strategic plan. We've talked to 11 different groups of middle and secondary students and heard their voice. And although nobody specifically asked for Thrive because it didn't exist until this moment, there are consistent messages around responsiveness, around some changes, and around meeting the needs of students in new and different ways. And though, you know, Thrive is, I also acknowledge Thrive is being driven by all of the staff at Phoenix to engage in those difficult, critical conversations about what's currently happening and what's currently not working. And what I'm deeply appreciative of this is an example of a staff asking, how can we shape ourselves to the needs of our students rather than how do our students shape ourselves to the system we currently have? And that is what people are asking for without it necessarily being Thrive. And I really appreciate your comment, Principal Nelson, that while Thrive will be iterative, the name might be iterative, I'm sure the program will be too, because if it's based on that responsive needs, that reflection and iterative process will continue to occur. And so I think that that is a reflection of some of the needs that are being surfaced as we talk to community, parents, and students, and it's a wonderful local idea that's born from your staff. So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Seeing no further comments, I do have a question. The question being that we did have the collaborative teaching team from Carey High present a couple of months ago regarding the grade 9 model and gathering those students that are flagging coming out of Phoenix. So will it be a direct line referral for some of our students that are participating in the Thrive program to have those conversations and perhaps have additional support when they reach that grade 9?
Yeah, we talked about that today. For the last 2 years, I've been creating the cohort classes for Carey High so that I will have direct input on who is in those classes and who they're connected, whether it's they go to 3 different areas or they're split up in 2 classes and stay with the same partner teachers at Carey High and can work with those people about. Because one of the comments that came today is we have to be very careful of, we're going to guide them through this process with as much help as possible of just not going like, well, that's great, you're attending and you're getting your grades up, and then just like, let it go. So how can we, this year, all our 6, 7, H programs will be on the same pace because it's all brand new, but hopefully by grade 7 next year with the kids that are repeating, we can start adding some of those more traditional teaching styles in there. And by grade 8, we're getting a little bit closer, and by Carey High, then those teachers are working with us too. So we are slow meeting them where they're at, but slowly getting them ready for what a Carey High model will look like so we can pass them out for sure.
Thank you for looking further down the road outside of middle school. Thank you very much for your presentation. It's an exciting program. I'm very looking forward to hearing how it all rolls out in September. I'm sure that you have an excellent team. Phoenix is kind of my heart middle school, Phoenix. Yeah, thanks so much for your commitment to kids.
Yes, guys, thanks very much.
Oh. So, moving on to electorate and board matters. 12A, the capital, plan response letter and bylaw number 2023 CPSD 7201. Kevin.
Yeah, so we got the announcement of our funded projects for this year. So last year, we applied for projects that get approved this year that we can build next year. We have a continuous project list identified of things that we would like to see improved, replaced, in our district. And these amounts are just too big to fit within operations. And the ministry, maybe like 8 years ago, acknowledged that it was difficult for districts to do it. So they slowly kind of announced these programs that would help us to maintain our facilities for the health and benefit of students. So some of the projects that were approved, Southgate and Quadra HVAC upgrades. So these are sort of moderately sized upgrades were approved through the school enhancement program. We also received a approval for a roofing project through the school enhancement program. This one's kind of interesting. Cortez, Ripple Rock. We received a series of energy upgrades through the carbon neutral capital plan at Cortez, Ripple Rock, and Sayward. As well, Sayward has been approved for a HVAC upgrade through the carbon neutral. So different sources. So for instance, the carbon neutral capital plan, we have to pay a carbon tax based on our consumption of fossil fuels and paper. The ministry takes that money, they turn around and they give it back to us. So, and they give it back to us based on the projects that we've identified that will help reduce our carbon imprint. And we also received approval for 2 buses, which is a continuous replacement of buses as they start to age so that we can continue to renew those. So what we're looking for from the board is for approval of this bylaw, which will allow us to start drawing the money and get these projects moving forward. So it is a bylaw, it's a 3 reading bylaw, but this will, again, once the ministry receives this, we can start drawing funds and covering costs.
Thank you, Secretary Treasurer Patrick. So the first bylaw, please patience, is that the capital plan bylaw number 2023-24 CPS D72-01 for projects identified in the March 9, 2023 capital plan response letter from the Ministry of Education be given all 3 readings at this meeting. May I have a mover? Trustee McMahon, seconded by Trustee Hagan. All those in favor? Okay, on to the motions. So that the capital plan bylaw number 2023-24 CPSD 72-01 for projects identified in the March 9, 2023 capital plan response letter from the Ministry of Education is hereby read for the first time. May I have a mover? Trustee Hagan, seconded by Trustee Gillis. All those in favor? So approved. And second reading that the capital plan bylaw number 2023-24 CPSD 72-01 for projects identified in the March 9, 2023 capital plan response letter from the Ministry of Education is hereby read for the second time. Trustee Hagan, Trustee Harper, all those in favor? And the final reading that the capital plan bylaw number 2023-24 CPSD 72-01 for projects identified in the March 9, 2023 capital plan response letter from the Ministry of Education is hereby read for the 3rd time, passed and adopted. Trustee Gladish, seconded by Trustee Briggs. All those in favor? Nice to see that everyone got their name on the list. Well done. So it has been unanimously approved, and we look forward. Oh, I'm sorry. Is there more?
No, just have a
Okay,
question.
sorry. Yes, question.
Just out of curiosity, when we have to dispose of our buses, do they go to the great website where people can buy used buses?
Yes,
And do we get to keep that money or does that go back to the province?
we get to keep it.
Okay.
Along the same lines, the buses, are they perchance, electric? EV buses?
So what the ministry does is the ministry provides us an amount at the current sort of market price for a diesel bus. Now what we would need to do is to seek additional funding for, and actually the board can cover the difference, but a electric bus is probably double what the funding is. So there are programs, we are looking at those programs to see if we can bridge the gap. At times, there have been nearly 100% grant funding available for electric buses. But you need infrastructure too. So the infrastructure costs last year were estimated about $300,000. So that will have to be in place first, and then we could look at the electric buses. I believe they're coming. The Association of Transportation BC is very, very active with federal government incentives. They're really well organized and assist school districts with getting good fleet deals, negotiating prices with vendors to have them all ready. And I know they've been working on some of the very large electric vehicle grants federally as well.
It's good to know.
And just to point out, our transportation department monitors kind of the electric bus fleets in other districts. There's a discussion group, and so it's not without challenges in other districts. So it's something we're keeping abreast of on a regular basis because we know that that's the direction we're going. But there are challenges with electric buses that other districts are experiencing.
Absolutely, challenges that I'm sure we can meet at some point.
Thank you for your comments, trustee Gladish and trustee McMahon. On to electric board matters 12B, which is the 2023-24 school calendar update.
Yeah, thank you very much. And so the original public agenda that went out has the aspirations for the superintendent tonight to be presenting a motion, or potentially to have the board support a motion for 3 years of calendars. We did put all 3 calendars out for feedback. We have a fairly extensive calendar consultation committee, which I chair. We did put out 3 calendars. Next year's calendar is very much in alignment with what's occurred the previous 3 years. In 24-25 and 25-26 did have proposed there was proposed 2 full Pro D days being split to make 4 half-day Pro D days. Well, anticipating that would cause potentially some attention and certainly a requirement likely on behalf of the district in order for trustees to be in a position to support it, or would likely need to solve some of the concerns that might be raised around childcare and so on. What was unanticipated was the consistency of response from all members of our school community, parents, staff, and students alike. Were very clear in providing feedback against having 4 half-day Pro D days. Since it is for educator learning and the opportunity to establish those professional learning communities, the support of staff for that initiative is essential. And so I would also like to point out, and I believe that I shared with trustees in an opening earlier this year from a young student named Zachary who spoke about his desire for a 4-day work week. I would also like to point out that Zachary has also written me a very extensive letter about why half days are a bad idea. And Zachary not only was very compelling himself, but actually engaged his whole class to write me. So with that in mind, I would like to wait to table the 24-25 and 25-26 school calendars to our next board meeting in April. At that time, we'll have had the opportunity to reconvene the calendar committee to look at that feedback and then make the final adjustments to those calendars to then present to trustees a school calendar that is reflective of feedback. One of the pieces that was appreciated, should share with trustees, most parents particularly appreciated the opportunity to provide that feedback. And there's an example of why that feedback loop is important, because it is changing the direction for the calendar committee. I also want to point out that there were very, very few comments outside of the concern around the 4 days. There was one comment supporting grateful for 2 weeks spring break, one comment saying 2 weeks was too little or too much, and one comment about the start of Christmas would prefer it to be earlier. So very, very, very little feedback about any of the other issues. So in light of that, I'm confident to present the 23-24 with certainly feedback that was very supportive of that calendar. And so my hope tonight is that the board will pass that, will put a motion forward to pass that calendar, and we'll consider the next 2-year calendar final drafts for our next board meeting.
You're here, and with that presentation, I'd like to put forth the motion that the 2023-24 school calendar presented by Superintendent Morrow be approved as circulated and presented to the minister as per the school calendar regulation of the School Act. May I have a mover? Trustee Gladish, seconded by Trustee McMahon. All those in favor? I wonder if he's thinking it.
And is it fair to say that Zach has the ears of superintendent?
He absolutely does. And that class will be getting a visit.
So moving on to 14A, business administration, operating grant fund update for 23-24. Secretary Treasurer Patrick.
Yeah, so basically last week we got our confirmation of our grants for next year. And it's that well. Thought I would just go through a couple things. So I've already brought the enrollment changes. So we're projecting a small increase in enrollment. We've kind of got some comparisons here. So this yellow column was the final of the current year. The white column is next year, which is what we're currently going through budget consultations on. And this confirmation of grant is really the place where it all starts. This tells us how much we're getting. We factor in our costs to know whether we're going to have to add or look at possibly reducing for next year. So some of the important things on this. When we brought the final budget, we had funding for 2 labor settlements, but not for the third. I can confirm that we have received that third settlement. But it wasn't reflected in this number here. So the difference between the per pupil funding from this year to next year goes from $7,885 up to $8,600. And that's an increase of 9.4%. It factors in 2 years of labor settlements. And the reason why I'm talking about that is I have been very vocal about administrative and principal, vice principal funding. We've lobbied on our behalf for it. We've mentioned it in multiple meetings. When you take the labor settlement fundings and add them up for all employee groups, it basically comes to that. So the ministry could make an argument that all labor settlement has been funded for both years. I believe, and I was gonna check when I was at the meeting, but when a labor settlement, let's say labor settlement is 2%, I'm not sure that I've really seen the block amount, the per pupil funding actually go up 2%. Typically, it goes up part of that. And part of the reason is 85-90% of our costs are labor, but there's 10% portion that isn't. So that 10% doesn't need to go up 2% because that's not permitted. So I just, through the meeting, I'm looking at this and starting to think that, and this may impact our budget direction and focus because like even last Wednesday when we have the grant announcement, I made a comment about potentially getting that extra funding, but having looked at this, I'm not sure that we're actually gonna get that extra principal, vice principal. No. They said potentially we would hear at the end of March, which means we have to start our budget process without knowing whether for sure we'll get that. But just the more I look at this, I'm not really sure that we're gonna get it. The other thing that they have done in the past is they've actually increased other supplemental grants like special education, Indigenous ed, more than. So they've taken the wage increase and they've actually given a larger percentage to those supplements and less to the school age per pupil. They haven't done that this year. Everything's been increased by 9.4%. So and it's huge. You can see the base allocation goes up like $4.6 million. There's a number of other grants that we also get. Maybe just move it over a bit so you can see some of the descriptions, but we do expect our grants to go up $6 million between this year to next year. But it's associated with a lot of costs. And I would say, as of what I know right now, all of the costs, all of that increase is associated with matching costs. So I don't expect that we'll be coming out ahead, but it will fairly closely match some of those costs that we have to adjust. So yeah, so that's the funding that we're looking for next year. Some other things that they announced was the food security grant. So this year we got a school, the student and family affordability, about $600,000. They heard feedback from people that that was a successful program and wanted it to continue. So they have announced a food security and ongoing food security program for $700,000. So our district has to set up a program to make sure and see who it's going to serve and how we're going to deliver that program. So that's some good news. Like right now, a number of school budgets and community links programs do provide food for students. So this program might be able to possibly replace some or supplement, like for sure it'll be a supplement to those other programs. So it might be able to shift some of that spending there to things other than food. And then there was also a $300,000 increase in our annual facility grants. So I think maybe recognition of the inflationary increases that we do. So that's really good news. That grant hasn't gone up in like 10 years. So so it would be really welcomed for us. So that's our grant. Again, on Thursday, we've already started our budget consultation. We met with the Indigenous Advisory Council last week, and we're going to meet with the budget function on Thursday. Still working with Jillian to get sort of what our number is that we're looking for or not looking for. But that structural surplus that we had identified now is like really, it's on their mind. So it's small deficit, small surplus, nothing significant. There's no big windfalls here. Some of this budget. So questions?
Dr. Rob, yeah, I just had a question. Looking at the block funding and the 9.4% increase, if that includes from calculator, if you look at that calculation of potentially including administrative increases in terms of exempt and PDP and so on, is it then that block funding would not take into account any of the inflationary measures that would be on supply budgets?
For our district, it's close to an either or. Like Yeah, it wouldn't fully fund admin and PVP increases. If it did, then it wouldn't fund anything for inflation. But that it is a way when you kind of are used to hearing some of the messaging coming out. If your district had 80% of salaries of the budget, then it likely fully funds and covers a little bit of inflation. If you're at 95% of your budget is salaries, then it wouldn't even come close. So, and they treat all of us equally, right? They can't say, okay, don't worry, you get a little bit this and how much value, you get nothing. But so, yeah, and it's a big impact because the amount for us will be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, which would have led to additional resources and supports of hundreds of thousands of dollars for students heading into next year. So, yeah, that's the message this year.
Any other questions? Kevin, if I may, just on that new food security funding, so those will be targeted funds specifically for food security programs. Do you have any idea what schools out of community links or school budgets are currently spending on food support programs?
I don't know the exact amount, but it is quite a bit. So an allocation does go out to each school and it's in the thousands of dollars for each school. Are we approaching 10? So, like, but this contribution is 4 or 5 times that. So it would definitely lead to an enhancement, to food security for families, but in what it looks like, if it's for like identified students, if it's for everybody, we still have to take a look at that as a school district. Now, some of the things to keep in mind with that though, is it comes out at $700,000 this year. We've been told 3-year funding, if it doesn't go up with inflation, as food costs go up, in effect, you're gonna see if 10% food costs go up, you see a 10% reduction. So some of that planning will have to be factored into what it looks like. It's likely gonna need some flexibility. But you can't argue that's a substantial contribution to the overall supports that the school district can offer.
Could you just remind me, with special purpose funds, as long, it's okay if we don't spend them down in the first year, we can roll them over as long as they're still designated as per government kind of parameters.
So Ministry of Education, it depends. So we have some special purpose funds that don't roll over, that are ministry provided, so they're fully targeted. If we don't spend it on that program, we can't spend it on other things, but they will actually recover that at the end of the year and move it over to another program. Our non-ministry, absolutely, if we don't spend it, we can save it. The student and family affordability, we've been given approval to carry forward unspent items. This will likely be the same, but what they have told us is this is a huge, huge program and they're not putting a ton of restrictions or guidance on it. They have told us that they will review it, monitor it. So we may roll out something that might need to change a little bit next year. They're gonna be looking at like how much labor is going into it. Yeah, how much goes unspent. So until we kind of get the announcement that it can be carried forward, I probably wouldn't count on it. But when we get that, then we can adjust our spending accordingly.
Thank you, Secretary, Treasurer Patrick. On to committee reports. So 15A, the Board Governance Committee meeting of March 16th. Vice Chair Gillis.
Well, we're just in the process of looking at, this is Trustee McMahon and I are beginning the process of looking at revision of some of our policies and hoping to bring to those a fresh lens, but a respectful lens of what has gone before. At the same time, recognize that some of our language and some of our current needs will need to be reflected. We certainly want to make these policies that serve our students and serve the success of our students, best of our ability.
Can think of no better team. No pressure. And on to 15B, the DPAC report from March 14th. Trustee Mayor.
Oh, yes. Well, they're always very enlightening, entertaining, very casual meetings. I think the biggest challenge facing them as a general rule right now is participation. They're finding it quite frustrating that they can't engage all the schools. They send messages out, it sounds like. Would you say this is true? And don't get any response. So they're feeling that to be the real focus of their attentions going forward is to try and increase the participation and spread some word of enthusiasm for the potential for DPAC in terms of its participation within the larger district and being able to connect with the board and the senior management team in terms of things like budget and so that at some point during the meeting, we always kind of get to that place. Why aren't there more people around the table? The last meeting, Andrea Paddock, our QP representative, attended to be able to share with them some of the vision of QP for childcare. And I think there was a lot of interest in questions and curiosity about not only the additional motivation around QPN childcare, but also in what Phil could offer them in terms of what our district is doing specifically. And also, I think there was some celebration that we are in a very, very positive place in terms of the way that we're rolling out our vision of childcare, particularly given that we will start with out of school care and our children will have the benefit of being out of school for that time. Whereas we'd heard that other districts are struggling with how to multi-use classrooms in order that the children come in, go into a classroom, and then they get whisked off to the gym for 15 minutes and the teacher can come in, try and set up her classroom for the day. And then at the end of the day, the kids stay in that classroom and the teacher has to try and secure her classroom in order that they can use it as a care zone. And it sounds like many people are not happy with that. So we're in a really advantageous position. The other item that came up was there was some concern that a number of schools are going to be caught in a gray zone for the, I want to call it gypsy moth, but there's another name for it. There's a more maybe scientific name for it, but there will be some spraying that takes place sometime in either April or maybe late March, April. And there's a lot of data that would suggest that it is not a healthy thing to have happen. And there is a distinctive spray zone right over Willow Point. And then there is an anticipated buffer where the spray kind of wafts out into. And so one of the parents at DPAC has been very, very, very passionate about trying to pursue as much information and as much kind of pushback against it as he can, and it looks unlikely that anything will change the course of things this year. But there's a hope that there might be some change going forward, and there are alternatives to deterring this moth and more targeted deterrence. This particular strategy is very general, like butterflies, all other moths, many, many different kinds of insects go under with this. And so there was a suggestion that maybe schools could be involved in terms of the distribution of traps or so I don't think there was any resolution about that, but it certainly was his aim to inform people that this is happening and it's not particularly healthy. I think that covers the main points with, yeah,
Thank you very much. Christine.
yeah, Associate Superintendent, Bismick and I,
Hang out together, Deep.
we hang out there at DPAC, yeah, we do.
Nice. Just looking at our agenda, there's not any other business. Are there questions from anyone present or online, for agenda items on this? Or questions on agenda items of this meeting? Thanks, it's been a long meeting.
There's been no questions that have come in online.
Seeing none from the gallery, I'd like to adjourn as per trustee Hagan.